I never thought a single conversation could unravel the fabric of my world. My name is Amelia, and I'm a 32-year-old graphic designer living in a small town outside of Seattle. On the surface, my life looked pretty normal. A cozy apartment, a loving boyfriend, and a job that I truly enjoyed. But beneath that veneer of stability lay a storm waiting to break. It all started when my mother-in-law, Carol, dropped a bombshell that would change everything. "Amelia," she said, her eyes sparkling with an unsettling excitement, "I've been thinking about getting some work done. You know, a facelift, maybe a tummy tuck. What do you think?" I froze, the words hanging in the air like a lead balloon. Carol had always been fixated on appearances, but this was a whole new level. I've always believed that beauty is more than skin deep, and while I would never discourage someone from doing what makes them happy, I felt a tightening in my chest. "Carol, you're beautiful just the way you are. You don't need that," I replied, trying to sound supportive. But her expression shifted, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. Weeks went by, and Carol's obsession only grew stronger. She started sending me links to cosmetic surgery websites and pictures of celebrities who'd had work done. It was relentless. One day she called me up, her voice dripping with urgency. "Amelia, I need your help. I want you to pay for my surgery. I've already found a great doctor, and it's going to change my life." I was taken aback. "Wait, what?" "Carol, I can't just pay for your surgery. It's a huge commitment, and I don't think it's necessary." Her response was immediate and cutting. "You're useless. If you can't help your family, what good are you?" I felt like I had been slapped. Useless? My heart raced as I hung up the phone, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, disappointment, and confusion collided in my mind. Was I really useless because I wouldn't fund her insecurities? It was a harsh blow. And I knew this wasn't just about money. It was about expectations, boundaries, and the kind of relationship we had. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. I wanted to scream, to cry, but mostly, I felt a deep resolve building within me. Carol had underestimated me, and I would show her exactly what I was made of. The next few weeks were a blur. I poured myself into my work, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling of her words. Useless. I began to question everything. My worth, my role in the family, and what it meant to stand up for myself. I knew I had to do something, but what? One afternoon, as I was brainstorming ideas for a new client project, a thought struck me like a lightning bolt. What if I launched a campaign that showcased real beauty? I could create a series of graphics highlighting women of all shapes, sizes, and ages who embodied confidence and authenticity. It would be a celebration of inner beauty over superficial changes. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just about the campaign. This was my chance to redefine what usefulness meant in my life. I wasn't just going to sit back and let Carol's harsh words dictate my self-worth. I could be a voice for others who felt pressured to conform to societal standards. I dove headfirst into the project, spending nights and weekends researching, designing, and connecting with women willing to share their stories. As I compiled their experiences and struggles, I felt a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in ages. These women were strong, resilient, and beautiful exactly as they were. What about you? Have you ever felt pressured to meet someone else's expectations? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. As the campaign began to take shape, I reached out to local businesses to sponsor the project. To my surprise, many were eager to get involved, seeing the potential for positive community engagement. With every passing day, I felt more liberated, more in control of my narrative. But then, just as I was beginning to feel that surge of confidence, Carol reached out again. "Amelia, I've made my decision. I'm going to go through with the surgery next month. You can either support me or not, but I'd really like you to be there." For a moment, I was torn. Part of me wanted to be supportive, to be the dutiful daughter-in-law who stood by her side. But another part of me screamed, "You're not doing this for the right reasons." The day of the surgery arrived, and I found myself sitting in the waiting room, surrounded by a mix of nervous patients and anxious family members. Carol's expression was a mix of excitement and anxiety as she prepared to go under the knife. In that moment, I realized that I had a choice to make. Would I continue to let her words define my worth, Or would I embrace my journey and the message I was beginning to share with the world? It was time to decide who I was going to be, not just for myself, but for Carol and everyone else who might be watching. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a much larger story, one filled with challenges, revelations, and a journey of self-discovery that would ultimately shape my relationship with Carol forever. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know below. As I sat there in that waiting room, I could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on my shoulders. Carol was counting on me, but I had to remind myself that my worth wasn't tied to her approval or the choices she made. I glanced around, noticing the other patients and their families. Some were nervously chatting, while others sat in silent contemplation. I wondered if they too were grappling with their own expectations and the weight of outside opinions. When Carol was finally wheeled into the operating room, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety wash over me. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. I started scrolling through social media, searching for anything that could distract me. Scrolling felt like a coping mechanism, a way to escape the reality of my situation. I stumbled upon a post from an old friend who was celebrating her recent engagement, and it reminded me of the life I once envisioned for myself, a life filled with joy, love, and authenticity. I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. It was hard not to compare myself to others, especially when I was surrounded by Carol's relentless pursuit of perfection. I closed the app and stared out the window. The sky was a beautiful shade of blue, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I wished I could be out there, living my life without the shadows of someone else's expectations looming over me. Hours passed, and when the doctor finally emerged, my heart raced. He approached me with a reassuring smile, and I leaned in, desperate for news. "The surgery went well, and she'll be in recovery shortly," he said. I exhaled, relief flooding my body. But that relief was quickly replaced with uncertainty, as I realized that this was just a momentary victory. The real challenge was yet to come. As I waited for Carol to wake up, I reflected on our relationship. It had always been a complicated dance between love and resentment. I cared for her, but I also felt suffocated by her expectations. It was like being trapped in a box, and she held the key. I wanted to break free, to redefine my identity on my own terms. Yet, the thought of disappointing her haunted me. When Carol finally opened her eyes, there was a sparkle of excitement mixed with the haze of anesthesia. "Did it work?" she asked, her voice slightly slurred. I nodded, forcing a smile. "You look great," I replied, even though I hadn't yet seen the results. As she recovered, I couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was pivotal for both of us. I wanted to support her, but I also wanted to establish boundaries. I spent the next few days helping her around the house, bringing her meals and making sure she was comfortable. But I also found myself having moments of clarity, realizing that I needed to focus on my own journey. One evening, as I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone again, I stumbled upon a video about self-love and acceptance. The speaker talked about the importance of embracing who we are, flaws and all. I felt a spark igniting within me. I began to write down my thoughts, pouring my feelings onto the page. I wrote about my struggles, my insecurities, and my desire to find my own voice. The more I wrote, the more I felt empowered. This was my story, and it deserved to be told. I didn't want to just be Carol's daughter-in-law. I wanted to be recognized as my own person. I wanted to inspire others to embrace their authentic selves, just as I was learning to do. I decided to start sharing snippets of my journey on social media. It began as a private account, a safe space for me to express my thoughts without the fear of judgment. But as I gained confidence, I began to share my posts publicly. I spoke about the challenges of being in a relationship with someone who had high expectations, about the importance of self-acceptance, and the beauty of imperfection. To my surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. People resonated with my story, and I started to receive messages from women who felt the same way. They shared their own struggles with self-worth and the challenges of societal expectations. I realized I wasn't alone in this fight. There were others out there, searching for validation and empowerment just like me. As the weeks passed, I noticed a shift in my relationship with Carol. She was healing physically, but there was still a tension in our interactions. I found myself standing my ground more often, voicing my opinions, and sharing my newfound confidence. It was as if I was learning to navigate the waters of our relationship with a different perspective. One afternoon, I decided to confront the elephant in the room. "Carol, can we talk?" I asked, my heart racing. She looked up from the couch, where she was flipping through a magazine featuring celebrities and their latest beauty trends. "Sure, what's on your mind?" "I think we need to address how we view ourselves," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I know you've been focused on looking a certain way, but I want you to know that you are enough just as you are." She raised an eyebrow, a mix of surprise and defensiveness on her face. "But I want to feel better about myself," she replied, her voice rising slightly. "I understand that, but I think there's a deeper issue at play here," I continued, feeling the tension thickening in the air. "You've always placed your worth on how you look, and I worry that it's affecting both of us." There was a long pause, and I held my breath, waiting for her response. Finally, she sighed. "Maybe you're right," she admitted quietly, her gaze dropping to her hands. In that moment, I realized that our conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. We were both on a journey of self-discovery, and while it was messy, I felt hopeful that we could navigate it together. I wanted to show her that self-worth comes from within, not from the opinions of others or the way we look on the outside. As I reflected on that conversation, I felt a sense of purpose. I was not just Carol's daughter-in-law. I was forging my own path, and in doing so, I hoped to inspire others along the way. This journey was far from over, and I knew there would be more challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of freedom and empowerment. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, not just for myself, but for Carol and anyone else who might need a reminder that they are more than their appearance. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of that conversation settle in. It was like I had just taken the first step onto a long and winding path, one that was filled with uncertainty, but also hope. I started to think about what this meant for my own life. I had always felt like I was living in someone else's shadow, especially when it came to my relationship with Carol. But in that moment, I realized I had the power to redefine my own narrative. I wasn't just the daughter-in-law. I was a woman with dreams and ambitions of my own, and it was time I started living like it. The following days were a mix of excitement and apprehension. I found myself waking up with a renewed sense of purpose. I began to explore what I truly wanted out of life. I had always been interested in photography, but I had never pursued it seriously. Perhaps it was time to dust off my old camera and see where it could take me. I decided to sign up for a photography class at the local community center. It felt like a small step, but it was mine. As I walked into the classroom on the first day, I felt a flutter of nerves. I wondered if I would fit in. Everyone seemed so confident and accomplished, but I pushed those thoughts aside. This was my journey, and I was here to learn and grow. I found a seat near the front and introduced myself to a couple of people. They were welcoming, and I soon realized we all had one thing in common: a passion for capturing the world through our lenses. The instructor was an experienced photographer with a vibrant personality. He encouraged us to explore our unique perspectives and not to be afraid of making mistakes. I remember feeling a rush of excitement as we ventured outside to take our first set of photos. I snapped pictures of everything: the flowers blooming in the garden, the kids playing in the park, the clouds drifting lazily across the sky. Each click of the shutter felt liberating, like I was capturing little pieces of my own life. After the first few weeks, I started sharing my photos online. I wasn't sure what to expect. My heart raced as I pressed post for the first time. But the response was overwhelmingly positive. Friends and family began to comment on my work, encouraging me to keep going. It felt like I was finally finding my voice, and I wanted to shout from the rooftops about my newfound passion. Meanwhile, my relationship with Carol began to shift as well. We had started talking more openly about our feelings and insecurities. I found myself looking forward to our chats. One afternoon, while sipping tea in the living room, Carol opened up about her own dreams. "You know," she said hesitantly, "I've always wanted to paint but never thought I was good enough." I could see the spark of creativity in her eyes, and I encouraged her to take a class. "Why not?" I said, smiling. "You could explore a whole new world, just like I'm trying with photography." She looked thoughtful for a moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "Maybe I will," she replied, a hint of excitement creeping into her voice. It was amazing to witness this transformation in her. She was starting to believe in herself, and it felt like we were lifting each other up. As the weeks turned into months, my photography journey flourished. I started to experiment with different styles and themes, sharing my work on social media. I even began to receive messages from people I didn't know, telling me how my photos inspired them. It was surreal. The more I shared, the more I realized that I was building a community around my passion. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, I received a message that took me by surprise. It was from Carol, asking if we could talk. My stomach sank. Had I done something wrong? Was she feeling insecure again? When we met, I could tell she was nervous. We sat down at the cafe we often frequented, and she hesitated before speaking. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice shaky, "about the surgery again. It's still on my mind." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I had thought we were moving past this. "Carol, we talked about this. You don't need surgery to be beautiful," I said gently. I know," she replied quickly. "But I've been looking at your photos and seeing how you embrace yourself. I wish I could feel that way too." Her honesty struck a chord with me. "You can, Carol. You just have to believe it," I urged. "What if we both started something new together? You with your painting and me with my photography? We can support each other." She looked at me, her eyes glistening with tears. "I don't want to hold you back. You're blossoming, and I feel stuck." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You're not holding me back. You're my family, and I want us both to thrive." In that moment, I realized how much our relationship had changed. We were no longer just mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. We were partners in a journey of self-discovery. As I left the cafe that day, I felt a mix of emotions. I was proud of both of us for being vulnerable and honest. We were finding our way out of the shadows together, and I couldn't wait to see where this journey would take us next. I could feel the winds of change blowing through our lives, and I was ready to embrace every moment. The days following that cafe encounter were a whirlwind of creativity and encouragement. Carol and I began texting each other regularly, sharing our ideas and inspirations. I'd send her snapshots of my photography work, pictures of sunsets, candid street scenes, and portraits of people lost in their own worlds. She would respond with images of her latest paintings, vibrant bursts of color that seemed to pulse with life. It was exhilarating to see her come alive through her art, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the role I played in nudging her toward this new path. One afternoon, I decided to visit Carol at her studio. She had transformed her small garage into a cozy haven for her painting. As I stepped inside, the air was thick with the smell of paint and the sounds of soft music playing in the background. I marveled at the canvases around the room, each one a testament to her growing confidence. "Wow, Carol, this is amazing," I exclaimed, taking in the riot of colors and textures. "Thanks. I've been experimenting a lot," she replied, her face lighting up with excitement. "I even tried some abstract pieces. It feels freeing to just let go and paint without worrying about the outcome." As we chatted, I felt a strong bond forming between us. It was strange to think that just a few weeks ago, we were at odds over something so superficial. Now, here we were, supporting each other in our passions. I realized that this was what I had always wanted, a deeper connection with her, one that went beyond the traditional expectations of a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship. One evening, as I was setting up for a photography project of my own, I received a message from Carol. "I've been thinking, we should do an art show together. What do you think?" My heart raced at the thought. An art show? What an incredible idea. "I love it. We could showcase your paintings and my photography. It would be a great way to share our journeys," I replied, my excitement bubbling over. After some planning and brainstorming, we decided to hold the show at a local community center. We wanted to create a space that felt warm and inviting, where people could come and feel inspired. We worked tirelessly, spending countless hours painting, photographing, and preparing for the big day. It was exhausting, but exhilarating. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. But as the date approached, I noticed something unsettling creeping back into my life. My mother-in-law, Brenda, caught wind of what we were doing. I braced myself for the inevitable judgment. It wasn't long before she called me, her voice sharp and critical. "I heard you're planning an art show with Carol." "Really? Is that how you're spending your time now?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Yes, Brenda. Carol and I are excited about it. We're pursuing our passions and supporting each other." She scoffed. "What a waste. I thought you were better than that. You should be focusing on more important things, like taking care of the family." My heart sank. "Brenda, this is important to us. Art is a form of expression and healing. It's not a waste." "Sounds like a distraction to me," she shot back. I could feel my frustration bubbling over, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Maybe you should try it sometime, Brenda. You might find it's not so useless after all." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before she replied, her voice dripping with disdain. "Don't get too full of yourself. You're still just a housewife with a camera. Remember that." I hung up, feeling a mix of anger and determination. I refused to let her words dictate my worth. I was more than just a housewife. I was an artist, a storyteller, and a woman carving out her own identity. I could feel the energy from my collaboration with Carol fueling my resolve. I had come too far to let Brenda's negativity bring me down. The night of our art show arrived, and the room was buzzing with excitement. Friends, family, and even a few strangers filled the community center, eager to see our work. Carol and I stood together, nervously awaiting the reactions. As people moved from piece to piece, I watched their faces light up with understanding and appreciation. It was a surreal experience to see how our art resonated with others. "Look at them," Carol whispered, her eyes glistening. "They really connect with what we've created." I nodded, overwhelmed by pride. This was a culmination of our hard work, our vulnerability, and our growth. As the evening unfolded, I felt the weight of Brenda's harsh words lifting off my shoulders. I was no longer just someone's daughter-in-law. I was an artist in my own right, and I was proud of it. As the night came to a close, a kind woman approached us. "You two are inspiring," she said, her voice warm. "Thank you for sharing your journey with us. I hope you do this again." Carol and I exchanged glances, and I could see the joy in her eyes reflecting my own. This was just the beginning. We had created something beautiful together, and I realized that my worth had never been tied to anyone else's opinion. I had found my voice, and it was a powerful one. As we packed up the last of our things, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey I had started with Carol had transformed not just our relationship, but also my understanding of myself. I was ready for whatever came next, and I couldn't wait to explore the possibilities that lay ahead. The next morning, I woke up with a spark of excitement that had been missing for too long. The sun streamed through my window, and I couldn't help but smile as I thought about the exhibition. It felt like a new chapter was unfolding, one where I was the author of my own story. I made my way to the kitchen, still buzzing with energy. As I brewed my coffee, I reflected on how far I had come. I could hear Brenda's voice echoing in my mind, reminding me of her dismissive comments. But instead of feeling the sting of her words, I felt a rush of determination. I was no longer going to let her opinions dictate my worth or my happiness. I sat down at my kitchen table, still clutching my steaming mug, and pulled out my notebook. I had started jotting down ideas for future projects with Carol, and I felt inspired to delve deeper into my creativity. What if we created a series that tackled issues of self-image and self-worth? I imagined vibrant colors and raw emotions poured onto canvas, each painting telling a story of resilience. I scribbled down ideas, each one sparking another. Before I knew it, I had a list of themes that felt not only personal, but also universal. As I dove deeper into this brainstorming session, my phone buzzed on the table, breaking my focus. It was a text from Carol. "Hey, let's meet up later to discuss our next steps. I have some ideas I think you'll love." I felt a flutter of excitement in my stomach. Carol had become such an integral part of my journey, and I couldn't wait to see what she had in mind. I quickly texted back, "Absolutely. Can't wait to hear what you've been thinking." As the day progressed, I found myself buzzing with anticipation. I spent the morning sketching out rough drafts of some concepts, losing myself in the process. The art was flowing through me, and I felt alive. Every brushstroke I imagined was a defiance against the negativity that had plagued me for so long. Later that afternoon, I met Carol at our favorite cafe, the one with the cozy atmosphere and art lining the walls. As soon as I walked in, I spotted her seated at a corner table, a colorful notebook open in front of her. Her face lit up when she saw me, and I felt my heart swell with gratitude for this friendship that had blossomed out of a shared passion. "Hey, you!" she exclaimed, standing up to embrace me. "I've been waiting to share this with you." She pulled out a sketch she had been working on. It was a stunning piece that depicted a woman breaking free from chains, surrounded by vibrant colors symbolizing freedom and self-acceptance. I was in awe. "This is incredible, Carol. It captures everything we've been talking about," I replied, my heart racing with excitement. "I thought we could explore themes of empowerment and self-love in our next series. You know, after everything we've both been through," she said, her voice imbued with passion. I nodded, feeling the energy in the air. "Yes, I've been sketching some ideas too. I want to tackle the concept of how society's expectations can distort our self-image." We spent hours bouncing ideas off one another, our conversation flowing like the paint we were about to unleash onto canvases. The excitement of creating something so meaningful together felt electric. I could already envision the impact our art could have on others, especially those who had faced similar struggles with self-worth. As we wrapped up our meeting, I couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity. I was on the right path, one that felt authentic and true to who I was. The shadows of Brenda's harsh words were fading further into the background, replaced with a burgeoning confidence that I had never known before. I walked home that evening with a skip in my step, eager to start working on our new project. But as fate would have it, the universe had other plans. The following week, I received an unexpected message from Brenda. It was a simple text, but it felt like a punch to the gut. "I need to talk to you. Can you come over?" My heart raced. I hadn't heard from her since the exhibition, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to protect the progress I had made, but another part of me felt a pull to face her. I took a deep breath and replied, "Sure, I'll be there." The anxiety bubbled in my stomach as I prepared myself for whatever confrontation awaited me. I reminded myself that I had grown stronger and more resilient. I wouldn't allow her to undermine my journey again. When I arrived at her house, she was waiting for me at the door, an expression of seriousness etched on her face. "Come in," she said, her tone lacking its usual warmth. I stepped inside, bracing myself for the conversation. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice softer than I expected. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation. I realize I may have been too harsh." I felt a flicker of hope, but quickly squashed it. I needed to stay grounded. "What do you mean?" I asked, my tone steady. I want you to know that I'm proud of you," she said. And for a moment, I was taken aback. "You've really come into your own, and I admire your talent." Her words hung in the air, heavy with a mixture of sincerity and something else I couldn't quite put my finger on. I had to remind myself to stay cautious. "Thank you, Brenda," I replied carefully. "But," she continued, her demeanor shifting, "I still think you could be doing more. You know, you could have helped me with my surgery. I still don't understand why you wouldn't." And there it was. The familiar sting of disappointment washed over me. Despite her attempt to show pride, it was clear that she was still clinging to her expectations. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart race. I had a choice to make. Would I allow her words to bring me down again? Or would I stand my ground? "I'm sorry, Brenda, but I can't support that decision," I said firmly. "I have to prioritize my own journey right now." Her face twisted with frustration, and I knew this conversation was far from over. But as I stood there, I felt the strength of my recent experiences wrapping around me like armor. I refused to let her dictate my self-worth any longer. I had discovered my passion, my purpose, and I wasn't going to let anyone, even family, take that away from me. In that moment, I realized that I didn't just want to prove my worth to Brenda. I wanted to prove it to myself. I was not useless. I was a creator, a dreamer, and I was ready to show the world what I was capable of. As I walked away from the conversation with Brenda, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me. It was as if I was carrying a storm inside, but instead of being overwhelmed, I chose to harness that energy. Each step I took felt purposeful, leading me toward a newfound clarity. I was no longer the girl who needed validation from others. I was becoming the woman who sought it within herself. I decided to head to my studio, a small sunlit space I had transformed from a cluttered storage room into a haven for creativity. The walls were adorned with sketches and photographs, each piece telling a part of my journey. I stepped inside and let the door close behind me, shutting out the world and the weight of expectations. As I stood in the middle of the room, I inhaled deeply, savoring the familiar scent of paint and wood. This was my sanctuary, where I could express myself freely without judgment. I looked at my easel, where a canvas awaited my touch. I had been working on a piece that reflected my struggles, a chaotic blend of colors and shapes, symbolizing my journey toward self-acceptance. Sitting down, I picked up my brush and let the colors flow. Each stroke became a release, a cathartic outpouring of everything I had bottled up inside. The blues represented my moments of sadness. The vibrant reds echoed my anger, and the yellows embodied the flickers of hope that had started to shine through. It was therapy in its purest form. As the hours passed, I lost myself in the rhythm of creation. The world outside faded away, and all that existed was me and the canvas. It felt exhilarating to finally express my emotions without restraint. But as I painted, a thought nagged at the back of my mind. Would Brenda ever understand this side of me? Would she ever see how important this was for my healing? I paused for a moment, brush in hand, and contemplated my relationship with her. I loved her deeply. She was my mother, my confidant, yet there was a wall that seemed insurmountable between us. I wanted her to see my growth, my progress, my journey, but every time I tried to share it, she seemed to revert to her old expectations. In that moment of reflection, I wondered how many of you have faced similar challenges with loved ones. Have you ever felt like they just couldn't see your true self? What did you do to bridge that gap? Let me know below. With renewed determination, I continued painting. I poured my heart and soul into this piece, hoping that one day I would be able to share it with Brenda. I envisioned her standing in front of my artwork, understanding the layers of emotion behind each color, each stroke. I wanted her to realize that this was not just a hobby for me. It was a lifeline, a way to reclaim my identity. Days turned into weeks, and I immersed myself in my art. I started experimenting with different techniques, attending workshops, and meeting fellow artists who shared my passion. Each interaction filled my spirit with inspiration, and I began to see my work evolve. The canvas was no longer just a surface. It was my voice, my story, my truth. Yet, despite the joy I found in my art, the tension with Brenda lingered. One evening, as I prepared to show her my latest piece, I felt a knot in my stomach. I had put so much effort into this creation, and I desperately wanted her approval. But what if she dismissed it again? "Mom, can we talk?" I ventured, my voice shaky. She looked up from her phone, curiosity etched on her face. "Sure. What's up?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "I've been working on something that means a lot to me, and I'd love for you to see it." Her eyes lit up with interest, but there was a flicker of hesitation, as if she was bracing herself for something she wouldn't understand. I led her to my studio, the air thick with anticipation. When she saw the painting, her expression shifted from curiosity to confusion. "It's interesting," she said, a hint of uncertainty in her tone. "Interesting. Mom, I put my heart into this. It's about my journey, my struggles," I replied, my voice rising slightly. "I get that, but I just don't understand why you would choose to paint something so dark," she said, her brow furrowing. "It's not just dark, it's real. It's a part of me," I exclaimed, frustration bubbling to the surface. Brenda sighed, her disappointment palpable. "I just wish you would focus on more positive things." I felt the familiar sting of disappointment return, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. How could she not see the beauty in my vulnerability? How could she not understand that this darkness was a part of my journey to healing? I wanted to scream, to shake her until she understood. Instead, I took a step back, trying to regain my composure. "Mom, I need you to see me. All of me. I can't pretend to be someone I'm not." Her silence hung in the air, and for a moment, it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Would we ever find common ground? Would she ever accept this new version of me? I realized then that my journey wasn't just about art or healing. It was about learning to stand tall in my truth, regardless of whether others understood or approved. As I stood there staring at my painting, I made a silent promise to myself. I would continue to create, to explore, and to express my truth, no matter how uncomfortable it made others. I refused to let anyone else's perception define my worth. And as I reflected on that promise, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Maybe, just maybe, one day Brenda would come to see my journey through my eyes. Until then, I would keep painting, keep expressing, and keep growing. I stepped away from the intensity of that moment, needing to breathe, to gather my thoughts. My art had always been my escape, the one place where I could pour out my heart without fear of judgment. But now, it felt different. It was no longer just an outlet. It was becoming a declaration of who I was and what I stood for. As I picked up my brush again, the familiar rhythm of painting began to wash over me. Each stroke was a reminder of my resilience, my refusal to be boxed in by someone else's expectations. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my art with renewed vigor. I spent hours in my studio, surrounded by the vibrant colors that seemed to breathe life into my spirit. It was in this space that I began to create a series that reflected my journey, the highs, the lows, and everything in between. I wanted to capture not just the transformation of my identity, but also the struggle of acceptance, both from others and within myself. One afternoon, as I mixed shades of blue and purple, I received a text from my husband, Jake. He was checking in, curious about how I was doing. I found his concern comforting, a stark contrast to the tension that had recently filled my life. I texted him back, sharing snippets of my creative process and how liberating it felt to express my truth on canvas. "Can't wait to see your new pieces," he replied. His support meant the world to me. It was a reminder that not everyone in my life was caught up in the expectations and judgments that had been weighing me down. As I painted, I found myself reflecting on Brenda's comments. "You're useless." Those words echoed in my mind like a haunting melody. I was determined to prove her wrong, not just to her, but to myself as well. I thought about the countless hours I had spent honing my craft, the late nights where I sacrificed sleep for the sake of my passion. I was anything but useless. I was an artist, a dreamer, and someone who fought to create beauty in the world. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I invited a few close friends over for a small art gathering. I wanted to share my new work and receive feedback from the people who truly understood me. The atmosphere was warm and filled with laughter, the kind of energy that reminded me of why I loved creating in the first place. My friends were supportive, each one genuinely excited to see the evolution of my art. They admired the boldness of my colors, the emotion that poured from each piece. Their enthusiasm was infectious, and for a moment, I forgot all about the negativity that surrounded my relationship with Brenda. As they admired my work, I felt a sense of validation wash over me. This was who I was, an artist, unafraid to share my journey, even when it meant being vulnerable. My friends' encouragement fueled my determination to keep pushing forward, and I made a mental note to keep surrounding myself with those who uplifted me. Days turned into weeks, and my art exhibit was approaching. I had poured everything into this show, a culmination of my struggles and triumphs. I wanted to share my story with the world, to show that transformation is not linear, but rather a chaotic dance of emotions and experiences. The night before the opening, I found myself filled with excitement and anxiety. Would people understand? Would they see the layers of emotion embedded in every brushstroke? As I stood in front of my canvases, I whispered a silent prayer for strength and clarity. I was ready to face whatever came next, ready to embrace the reactions of those who would walk through the gallery doors. I decided that I wouldn't let anyone, not even Brenda, dictate how I felt about my work. I was proud of what I had created, and that was enough. The day of the exhibit arrived, and I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that felt authentic yet confident. I wanted to present myself as the artist I had become, not the woman who felt like a failure in someone else's eyes. The gallery was buzzing with energy, people mingling and discussing the pieces on display. As I walked through the space, I overheard snippets of conversation, praise for the bold colors, the raw emotions depicted in my art. Then I spotted her. Brenda had come. My heart raced as I watched her move through the gallery, her expression unreadable. Part of me wanted to run to her, to demand her acknowledgement of my hard work, while another part wanted to hide, afraid of what she might say. I took a deep breath and decided to approach her. "What do you think?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Brenda turned to me, her eyes scanning the canvases. "I see you've been busy," she said, her tone surprisingly neutral. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a dig, but I decided to take it as a step forward. I wanted to show her that I wasn't going to be defined by her perceptions. "These pieces represent my journey, Mom. They're a part of me." She looked at me, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something shift in her expression. Maybe it was recognition, or perhaps a flicker of understanding. But before I could decipher it, she turned back to the canvas, her silence wrapping around us like a heavy fog. I felt a mix of disappointment and hope, wondering if this could be the beginning of a change. As the evening continued, I engaged with guests, sharing the stories behind my work, watching their eyes light up with interest and appreciation. With each conversation, I felt the weight of Brenda's expectations begin to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. I was here, I was proud, and I would no longer be anyone's definition of useless. The night was a celebration of my journey, and I was determined to keep moving forward, one brushstroke at a time. The days following the exhibition were a whirlwind of emotions. I was still riding the high from that night, but the reality of my relationship with Brenda loomed heavily in my mind. While I felt liberated by my art, I couldn't shake the feeling that her opinion of me was still a ball and chain, dragging behind as I tried to forge my own identity. I knew I had to confront this once and for all. One afternoon, sitting in my studio, I contemplated my next steps. My phone buzzed incessantly, and I found a string of messages from my friends who had attended the exhibition. They were congratulatory, offering praise and support, and I appreciated every word. But Brenda's silence was deafening. It felt like a challenge, an invitation to dig deeper into the trenches of our relationship. I decided it was time for a face-to-face talk. When I finally mustered the courage to call her, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. "Can we meet?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think we need to talk." "About what?" she replied, her tone clipped. "About us. About the exhibition. About everything." "Fine. Saturday at 3. The conversation ended, and I spent the week replaying our past interactions in my mind. I thought about the times I felt belittled, the moments where I craved her approval, but was met with disappointment. I had to approach this meeting with clarity and resolve, so I wrote down my thoughts, sorting through my feelings like an artist mixing paint. Saturday arrived, and as I walked to the cafe where we agreed to meet, I felt a knot in my stomach. The air was crisp, and the leaves crunched under my feet, a reminder of the changes that fall brings. I arrived early, ordering a latte to steady my nerves. When Brenda walked in, she looked much like she always did, dressed impeccably, a fierce expression on her face. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Let's get to it," she replied, sitting down and crossing her arms. I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. I wanted to talk about the exhibition and how it made me feel. "Okay," she responded, her expression unreadable. "I felt proud of my work, Mom. I've put so much into it, and I want you to see that it's a part of me, not just something to dismiss." "Why do you care what I think?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. "Because you're my mom. Your opinion matters to me, but I realize that I can't let your judgment define who I am." Brenda raised an eyebrow, and I could tell she was preparing a retort. "And what exactly does that mean? You're an artist now, all of a sudden?" "It means I'm learning to embrace who I am, even if that's not what you envisioned for me. I'm not useless, and I won't apologize for my choices." Her gaze hardened, and I could feel the tension crackle between us. "You think you're some kind of rebel, don't you? Refusing to pay for my surgery? Showcasing your art? This is all just a phase." "Maybe it is, but isn't every part of our lives a phase? I'm finding my voice, and it's not just about art. It's about standing up for myself. Brenda paused, her eyes narrowing. You think you're standing up for yourself? By refusing to support your own mother? By refusing to be defined by what you want me to be? You've spent so long telling me what I'm not that I've almost believed it myself. She opened her mouth to respond, but I pressed on, driven by a surge of confidence. I'm not going to be the daughter who only exists to fulfill your expectations. I want to be me, flaws, dreams, and all. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, and I felt both scared and exhilarated. I had said it. I had finally laid bare my feelings. But what would she do with that? Art doesn't pay the bills, you know, she said, her tone low and matter-of-fact. That's true, but it pays for my happiness, I replied, my heart racing. And if you can't see that, then maybe we need to rethink how we view each other. Is that a threat? No, it's a realization. I want a relationship with you, but it can't be based on guilt or resentment. I need you to see me for who I am, not who you want me to be. Brenda shifted in her seat, and for a moment, her tough exterior cracked. I saw a flicker of something. Maybe fear, maybe regret. You think I don't see you? No. I think you see a version of me that you created. I want you to see the real me, the one who is passionate and flawed but trying her best. The conversation hung in the air, thick with unspoken words. I held my breath, waiting for her response, hoping against hope that my vulnerability would resonate with her. Fine, she finally said, her voice softer. I'll try to see you. Those words hung between us, fragile yet hopeful. I knew it was only a small step, but for the first time, I felt like I had been heard. I wasn't useless. I was learning, growing, and finding my place in this world. And with that realization came a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt before. We had a long way to go, but maybe, just maybe, we could navigate this path together. After that conversation, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had been living under the oppressive shadow of Brenda's expectations for so long that I didn't realize how much I craved the freedom to be myself. But change doesn't happen overnight, and I knew we were just at the beginning of a long journey. The next few weeks were a mix of cautious optimism and old habits resurfacing. Brenda was trying, and for the most part, I was too. We began sharing more moments that felt genuine, but I could sense the tension still simmering beneath the surface. I decided to channel this newfound energy into my work. With every piece I created, I felt a little more like the person I wanted to be. I started to experiment with my designs, pushing the boundaries of what I thought was possible. It was invigorating to explore my creative side without the weight of Brenda's judgment. I remember one afternoon, I was sketching at a cafe when I spotted a woman with a striking scarf draped elegantly over her shoulders. It inspired me to rethink my color palette, and I ended up creating something vibrant and unique, much to my delight. But just as I felt I was gaining traction in my life, Brenda's influence would creep back in. One evening, we were having dinner when she casually mentioned a cosmetic procedure she wanted to get. My heart sank. I had thought we were moving past our previous conflicts, but the topic of surgery was still a landmine. You know, if you really wanted to look younger, there's this fantastic clinic I heard about, she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of resentment. Brenda, do you really think that's the answer? Just changing your appearance? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She waved her hand dismissively. You wouldn't understand. You're young and don't have to deal with what I deal with every day. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of our previous conversation. But what if instead of focusing on changing ourselves, we focused on accepting who we are? You're beautiful the way you are, and I wish you could see that. Her expression hardened. You don't get it. I want to feel good about myself. It's not just about how I look. It's about confidence. And there it was, the same old argument. I felt trapped in this cycle, where her insecurities would swallow me whole if I let them. I wanted to be supportive, but at what cost? I felt the need to stand my ground. Brenda, I want you to feel confident too. But surgery isn't the only way. You're so much more than your looks. She stared at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes, but it vanished just as quickly. If you cared about family, you would help me with this, she said, her voice rising slightly. Caring about family doesn't mean enabling unhealthy choices, I replied, my heart racing. The conversation spiraled from there, and I realized we were back at square one. I was exhausted, not just from the argument, but from the realization that some things might never change. I took a step back, deciding I needed to refocus on my own growth. The following weeks turned into a sort of unspoken truce. Brenda and I avoided the topic of surgery altogether, but the tension lingered. I poured myself into my work, attending workshops and networking events, anything to keep my mind occupied. I started to build relationships with other creatives, and it was refreshing. I felt like I was finally part of a community that valued creativity over appearance. One evening, I received an invitation to an art showcase featuring local artists. I was excited but also nervous. It was a chance to put myself out there and share my work with a broader audience. But the pressure to impress was intense. After a long day of preparing my pieces, I stood in front of the mirror, reminding myself of everything I had worked for. "You're more than enough," I whispered to my reflection. The night of the showcase arrived, and as I entered the gallery, I was enveloped by the warmth of creativity surrounding me. I saw people mingling, laughing, and appreciating art in all forms. It was a beautiful reminder of why I loved what I did. As I unveiled my pieces, I felt a rush of pride. I was finally sharing my vision with the world, and it felt liberating. As I stood next to my work, I noticed a woman admiring one of my pieces. She turned to me and said, "This is stunning. You really have a unique style." I could feel my heart swell. "Thank you. I've been working hard to find my voice." We chatted for a while, and I could see her genuine interest in my journey. It felt so refreshing to connect with someone who appreciated me for my talent rather than my appearance. As the night progressed, I found myself feeling more and more comfortable. I received positive feedback from several attendees, and it fueled my confidence. For the first time in a long time, I felt proud of who I was, not just in my art, but as a person. After the showcase, I was on a high. I could hardly wait to share the experience with Brenda. But as I walked through the door, the mood shifted. Brenda was sitting on the couch, her expression inscrutable. "You went to that art show, huh?" she said, barely looking up from her phone. "Yeah, it was amazing, Brenda. I got so much positive feedback," I gushed. But she didn't seem interested. "That's nice," she said flatly. I could feel the disappointment welling up inside me. "Brenda, I really want to share this part of my life with you. It was a breakthrough for me." She finally looked up, her expression hardening again. "It's great that you're doing your little art thing, but I need more support from you. I can't believe you still think you're so much better than me." In that moment, I realized we were still miles apart. I had grown, but she seemed stuck in her own cycle of insecurity. I took a deep breath, knowing this would be an ongoing battle. I had to remind myself that I was not useless. I was creating my own path, and I had to believe in that strength. The next few days were a blur of art supplies, late nights, and self-reflection. I poured myself into my work, feeling as if each brushstroke was a declaration of my independence from the expectations that had long dictated my life. Yet, with every piece I created, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Brenda's words were echoing in my mind. It was as if they were a weight I couldn't quite shake off, no matter how hard I tried. I had to remind myself that my journey was about more than just proving I wasn't useless. It was about rediscovering who I truly was. I spent hours in my studio, surrounded by canvases and paints, losing myself in the colors and textures. Each day, I found new ways to express the turbulence I felt inside. I explored themes of resilience and self-acceptance, channeling my emotions into my art. The more I created, the more I realized how much I had to say. But there was always a lingering thought in the back of my mind. Would Brenda ever understand? One evening, I decided to invite a few friends over to showcase my latest work. I thought it would be a great opportunity to share my progress and maybe even get some honest feedback. As I set up the space, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I wanted this night to be special, a moment to validate all the hard work I had been putting in. When my friends arrived, their faces lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Wow, these are incredible," one of them exclaimed, while another grabbed a glass of wine and settled into a chair to admire the pieces. I felt a rush of joy as I watched them engage with my art, discussing the meaning behind each piece and how it resonated with their own lives. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of belonging, a community that appreciated me for my creative spirit. After the showcase, we all sat around chatting, and that's when the conversation shifted unexpectedly. One of my friends mentioned how supportive their partner was of their creative endeavors. "I can't imagine being in a relationship where my partner wouldn't support my dreams," she said, glancing around the group. I felt a pang of longing, wishing Brenda could be as supportive as my friends' partners. Feeling vulnerable, I decided to share my experience with Brenda. "You know, it's tough because I want to share this part of my life with her, but she doesn't seem to care," I said, my voice tinged with frustration. "I just want her to be proud of me." My friends nodded in understanding, but their sympathy didn't ease the ache in my heart. "You're doing amazing things, and you need to focus on the people who uplift you," another friend said. "Brenda has her own journey, and you can't carry that for her." As the night wore on, I found myself reflecting on that notion. I had spent so much energy trying to convince Brenda of my worth that I often forgot to recognize it myself. Maybe it was time to prioritize those who celebrated my journey instead of those who criticized it. Weeks went by, and I continued to immerse myself in my art. I even began to sell a few pieces online, which felt like a significant milestone. The thrill of seeing my work appreciated by strangers was intoxicating. But even as I reveled in my success, Brenda's comments lingered in the background, like an uninvited guest at my celebration. I decided to take a break from the chaos and plan a small getaway to recharge. I needed a space where I could breathe, reflect, and maybe figure out how to navigate my relationship with Brenda. I booked a quaint cabin in the woods, hoping the natural surroundings would inspire me and give me clarity. Once I arrived, I was enveloped by the serenity of nature. The air was crisp, and the sounds of rustling leaves and chirping birds filled my senses. I settled into a routine of painting at dawn and journaling at dusk, capturing my thoughts and feelings on paper. The act of writing became almost cathartic, allowing me to articulate the confusion that had been swirling in my mind for so long. One morning, as I stood on the porch with my coffee, I realized how far I'd come. I had taken steps toward my dreams, and though the road was rocky, I felt empowered. I jotted down my thoughts in my journal, reflecting on the importance of surrounding myself with people who uplifted me. I wanted to embrace my journey wholeheartedly, and that meant letting go of the need for validation from Brenda. But as I prepared to head back home, I couldn't ignore the nagging worry about our relationship. Would Brenda ever come around? I felt torn between wanting her to accept me and realizing that I couldn't force her to change her perspective. When I returned home, the atmosphere felt heavy. Brenda was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone as usual. I took a deep breath and approached her, ready to open up about my getaway and what I'd learned. But before I could say anything, she looked up and said, "So, did you enjoy your little retreat? Did it make you feel like an artist or something?" Her words cut deeper than I anticipated. I stood there, caught between hurt and determination. I could feel the weight of her judgment pressing down on me, but I had to remind myself of the strength I had found in the woods. I couldn't let her comments derail my progress. I took a moment to gather my thoughts and decided that this time, I wouldn't let her define me. I was more than what she thought, and it was time to show her just how much I had grown. I took a seat across from Brenda, trying to channel the calm energy I had gained during my retreat. "You know, it was really enlightening," I started, carefully choosing my words. "I realized that I've been focusing so much on what others think of me, especially you, and I need to shift that perspective." Brenda raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "Enlightening? Really? What did you see out there? A bunch of trees?" She rolled her eyes, and for a second, I felt the familiar sting of her dismissiveness, but I pressed on. It wasn't just about the scenery. It was about finding clarity and understanding what truly matters to me. She leaned back, arms crossed, waiting for me to say something she could tear apart. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, ready to rebut anything I might say. "What matters to you is clearly not what matters to me," she quipped, as if she were the one who held the monopoly on values. "Maybe," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. But I've realized that my worth isn't defined by your expectations or anyone else's. I'm working on my art, and it feels authentic. I want you to see that part of me. Brenda snorted. Art, huh? And what's that going to do for you? Get you a fancy job? Make you rich? Her sarcasm dripped from her words like venom, but I wasn't going to back down. It's not about money, Brenda. It's about expression. It's about being true to myself. There's more to life than just financial security or societal acceptance. I could see her processing my words, but the wall she had built around her emotions was still firmly in place. You think you can just wave a magic wand and everything will change? Life doesn't work that way. Maybe not, I countered, feeling a surge of bravery. But I believe that if I keep working on what makes me happy and fulfilled, it'll lead me to where I need to be. Just because you don't see the value in it doesn't mean it's not there. Brenda huffed, clearly agitated. So you're saying you don't care what I think? That's rich. You've been seeking my approval since day one. I felt a flicker of anger rise within me. It's not that I don't care. I care about our relationship. But I can't keep sacrificing my identity for your acceptance. It's unhealthy. She was silent for a moment, and I thought maybe my words were sinking in. Perhaps she would finally understand how damaging her constant criticism had been to my self-esteem. But then she said, "Then maybe you should just accept that you're not cut out for this world. Useless is what you are." Her words hit like a slap in the face, and I felt the tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "You think I'm useless?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I've worked so hard to be seen, to be heard. I've built a life for myself, even if it's not what you envisioned. That doesn't make me useless." Brenda shrugged, her indifference chilling. "You can build whatever life you want, but it won't matter if you can't even provide for yourself. Art won't put food on the table." I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my emotions in check. "And that's where we differ, Brenda. I'm not just chasing a paycheck, I'm chasing passion. I refuse to equate my value with how much money I make. You may see it as useless, but I see it as vital." She looked at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. "You'll realize soon enough that passion doesn't pay the bills. You're going to be alone, stuck in a bubble of your own making." The comment cut deeper than I wanted to admit, but I could feel the old patterns starting to surface, and I had to fight against them. "Maybe I will be alone," I said, a new determination settling in. "But at least I'll be true to myself. I'd rather be alone and happy than surrounded by people who don't understand me or value who I am." Brenda scoffed, but I was done letting her remarks dictate my worth. "You might think I'm useless, but I'm starting to see my potential. I've been working on my art, and it's something I'm proud of. I'm creating a body of work that reflects my journey, my struggles, and my growth. Good luck with that," she replied dismissively, but I could see a flicker of doubt cross her face. "You think you can just throw some paint on a canvas and call it art? It doesn't work that way." I felt my heart race as I pushed through the negativity. "But I'm not just throwing paint. I'm pouring my heart and soul into it. I'm telling my story, and that's powerful. It's a part of me that no one can take away." Brenda crossed her arms tighter, her expression hardening. "Whatever you say. Just don't expect me to cheer you on from the sidelines. I'm not going to support a fantasy. Support or not, I'm doing this for me. I'm done chasing your validation. I need to embrace who I am, flaws and all. Maybe that's what you find useless. But to me, it's everything." And with that, I felt a wave of liberation wash over me. I had stood my ground. I had fought for my voice. I had reminded myself that my worth was not defined by anyone else's opinions or expectations. I was more than Brenda's judgment. I was an artist, a creator, a woman forging her own path. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to believe it. It's funny how a moment of clarity can shift everything. I stood there, in that small, dimly lit studio, feeling the weight of Brenda's judgment slowly lift off my shoulders. It was like shedding a heavy coat that had weighed me down for far too long. I had spent years trying to mold myself into someone I thought others would accept, but in that instant, I realized that the only acceptance I truly craved was my own. The truth is, stepping into my identity as an artist was not just about the paint or the canvas. It was about embracing every part of me, even the messy, chaotic bits. As I picked up my brush again, I felt the brush strokes become lighter, more fluid. It was as if I were painting not just colors onto a canvas, but emotions onto my very soul. With every stroke, I was letting go of the fears that had kept me confined. I painted with an urgency, each color representing a facet of my journey. The vibrant reds for my passion, the deep blues for my sadness, and the sunny yellows for my fleeting moments of joy. Each layer I added felt like a testament to my resilience, my strength to rise above the doubts of others. Weeks turned into months, and as I continued to pour my heart into my work, I noticed something remarkable. The more authentic I became in my art, the more I started to attract people who resonated with my journey. I launched my first exhibition, a small gathering of friends and fellow artists, and I was terrified. What if they didn't get it? What if my vulnerability was met with indifference? But I knew I had to show up for myself, even if it meant standing alone. The night of the exhibition was filled with nervous energy. As people walked through the gallery, I could see their eyes light up at certain pieces. They laughed, they cried, and they shared stories of their own struggles. It was as if the walls were not just filled with my art, but with the collective stories of everyone who had dared to dream, to create, to be vulnerable. I remember a woman approaching me, tears in her eyes, and she said, "Your art speaks to me. It feels like you're telling my story." In that moment, all my fears washed away. I realized my voice had power, more power than I had ever imagined. Brenda didn't show up that night. Part of me hoped she would, that she would see what I was creating and perhaps have a change of heart. But maybe, just maybe, this journey wasn't about her acceptance. It was about my own growth. I had spent so long seeking validation from others, and now I finally understood that I didn't need her approval to be proud of what I had achieved. I had found my community, a group of people who celebrated authenticity, just like I was learning to. As my work gained more recognition, I faced new challenges. I learned that not everyone would understand my journey. Critiques came, and while they sometimes stung, I reminded myself that they were just opinions, reflections of someone else's perspective. I began to view them as opportunities for growth, rather than attacks on my worth. I learned to separate my identity from my art. My creations were expressions of myself, but they did not define who I was as a person. Through this journey, I also learned the importance of self-care. I started to set boundaries, allowing myself to step back when the noise of the outside world became too overwhelming. I took time to recharge, to sit in silence, and to remind myself of why I began this journey in the first place. I began to meditate and reflect on my experiences, writing down my thoughts and feelings. This practice became a grounding force, allowing me to reconnect with my inner self and maintain my creative flow. I also discovered the joy of collaboration. I sought out other artists, sharing ideas and techniques, and I found that working together sparked a new kind of inspiration. We shared our fears, our successes, and our dreams, and it felt incredible to be part of a supportive network. It was a reminder that art is not just a solitary endeavor. It's a bridge that connects us all. Looking back, I can see how far I've come. I remember the girl who was afraid to speak up, who craved approval from someone who didn't even understand her. I remember the moments of doubt, the tears shed over canvases that felt too heavy to lift. But I also remember the triumph of standing my ground, of choosing to embrace who I am. That choice transformed my life in ways I could never have imagined. Now, I stand here as a woman who is proud to call herself an artist. I wear my identity like a badge of honor, and I hope my story inspires others to do the same. If you're grappling with self-doubt or feeling pressured to conform to someone else's expectations, I want you to remember, your voice matters. Your story matters. Don't let anyone silence you. What are some moments in your life where you felt the need to stand up for yourself? Let me know below. As I continue to create, I do so with a newfound sense of purpose. I'm not just painting for myself anymore. I am painting for every woman who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy. I am creating a space for others to find their voice, to explore their emotions, and to embrace the messy beauty of being human. This journey is far from over, and I can't wait to see where it takes me next. It's a beautiful reminder that sometimes The hardest battles lead to the most profound transformations. And in the end, the greatest work of art we can create is a life lived authentically. Thank you for being part of my journey, and here's to embracing every color of our stories together.